Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up. This is where I talk about the books that I read last week, or what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. I had a phenomenal reading week, and I cannot wait to tell you all about it. So I'm just going to jump right in. The very first book that I read was The Bass Rock. Now, this was put out last year. This is by Evie, Wyld. And I received an ARC on NetGalley to review this. I'd heard good things about it, but I didn't know if it was going to be for me. I didn't know that it was going to be as spectacular and as amazing and as provocative as it really was. This is such a smartly crafted, such a sharply written story. You've got three timelines and three different sets of women kind of talking about their lives, all anchored in this one place on the Scottish coast. You've got one timeline of Sarah in the 1700s. She has been condemned as a witch and is on the run, then want to kill her. Then you've got Ruth, who at the end of World War II, she has entered into a marriage, and is a marriage with a man. She is his second wife. His first wife died, and he's got two small children, and they buy this home. And the third is this woman whose name is Viv, and Vivian is at that same home, and her father has died, and so she's going through things at the home and trying to prep it for sale. Now, her father was one of those stepchildren that Ruth was married into that family. There is a gothic, pervasive sense of doom and terror and violence that seeps through the text, and it's very real and it's very realistic, and there's this. It's just all encompassing. And what I loved about this book is it deals with how these women are adapting to this environment, who are adapting to this milieu of regular everyday terror. Example, we open up with Viv really late night at a store, and she's buying a few things, and a woman comes up to her, and she has never met this woman before. The woman is a little odd, and the woman says, it kind of pretends to know her and says quietly, there's a man by your car, hunched by your car. Let me walk out with you. And so immediately she doesn't know this woman. Does she trust this woman? What's going on? Who is this? And so you get the sense that there's something going on. It's very, very sinister. And she does walk out with the woman, and sure enough, there was a man that she ends up seeing who kind of slinks away. He was hidden by her door. It's moments like that, and that are really subtle, that are potential violence. And then there's actual violence that happens. And you see that the women, both Ruth and Viv, have suffered from mental illness, have suffered from collapses because of the strain of this violence that is in their lives. It's a story of sisterhood. It's a story of very, very real danger that exists in women's lives. And what I appreciated about this book so much is that it doesn't gloss over it. It takes you really into those moments of fear. And it was a frightening book. It was I have to admit, I was shaking. I was literally shaking at the end. But it's one of those that was so smartly crafted and smartly written that I think I'm going to return to this. It was an exceptional read. So for the second book, I wanted to continue on with my Invisible Cities project, which I'm having a wonderful time reading all of these countries. As a reminder, the countries for January were Argentina, Morocco, and Japan. And so I was looking through trying to figure out what I wanted to read for Japan, and I saw The Thief on script by Fuminori Nakamura. And The Thief is translated by two people, by Sokoto Izumo and Stephen Coates. Now, I had read his first novel, his debut novel. This is The Gun, and this was translated by Allison Markin Powell. And I liked The Gun very much. It was a very cool, very disaffected, distant, reserved type of narrator, kind of like a noir, very noir, kind of noir meets Zen, where it's very sparse. There's not a lot of emotive, flowery language or anything like that. And so I had an expectation that was probably what I was going to get with The Thief. And I got that and more. I really liked this book. This was very stylized. It's a story of this man who's a pickpocket. And we are with him as he travels around the subway system in Tokyo. And you learn all of the tricks of how he gets them to look one place and then he does something else. All of the tools, all of the accoutrements that a good pickpocket has. He is very isolated. There's nobody in his life. There's no connections. We don't know a lot of his backstory. We don't know a lot about him at all. He's kind of this mystery. He even he's so good at what he does that even at the end of the day, when he's kind of looking at all of his loot that he was able to achieve, there are things that he doesn't even remember taking. And he's known for being able to spot who has the best things in the subway car as he's in them, which is quite interesting. So he runs into his ex-partner that kind of came up with him as a pickpocket. And they used to run all sorts of scams together. And he has since gone on his own. And he gets pulled into doing a job with his friend to help him out. And then it becomes a bigger lure for a bigger problem that he gets kind of stuck in this web. In and along, there's this storyline where he's in the supermarket and he sees a young hostess type mother and her young son. He recognizes that they are shoplifting, but they're not very slick about it. And he also sees someone spotting them. And so he intercedes and kind of lets them know that they're about to get busted. The boy has an affinity for him and it develops into this little relationship. Now, it's little only because there's only so much this man can give. He is definitely dead inside. So this was, if you like noir, if you like crime thrillers, if you want to read something of Japanese kind of noir, this is a great one. And his work is very short and it's very easy to read. And there were kind of nods to Camus, The Stranger, that style, as also nods to Dickens with the pickpockets and kind of that culture. So I enjoyed it very much. Then I wanted to continue and I fell in love with this book. This is Tokyo Ueno Station by Miri Yu, translated by Morgan Giles. This book was so beautiful. I saw a few people reading it. I have seen it before. This is by Tilted Axis Press is what did this translation. And it was released in 2019. I think the original was done in 2014, if I'm remembering correctly. But again, Japanese translated fiction. And it's a very compassionate, very focused, very poignant story about one man's life. And this man is unhoused. He lives in a park outside the Tokyo train station. And he's been a laborer for 12 years. He had a family, he married, he had 2 children, and his son was born on the exact same day as the prince, the first male heir to the emperor of Tokyo. And he talks about his day-to-day life, both his current life as an unhoused person. And we get snippets of people walking by. We get snippets of the seasons. We get snippets of kind of day-to-day life that is kind of passing him by that he's observing. So much so that you get a sense that he could be a ghost. He's not participating, he's observing, and he's taking these things in. And it's not a pitying book. It's very, very passionate, compassionate, very poignant, very beautifully written. And you just get a sense of what led him to being a poor laborer, but someone who always worked and always had money, to being someone who is anchored in this spot and seeming unable to move forward. I thought this was a lovely book, and this is something that I actually want to own myself. I read it on script as well. Then the next book that I read, I told you I'm on a roll. I read The Eagle and the Ninth. This is by Rosemary Sutcliffe. This is a completely different type of book. I have known about this book because of Slightly Foxed podcast. So I'm a huge fan of that podcast, along with Backlisted, which I think you've heard me talk about before. Slightly Foxed is a little more genteel, and it's like, it's just delightful sitting around a table with these lovely ladies and talking about the stories and books that they found. It backlisted as well in the archives, and they do a quarterly journal that has stories, and then they also mention the podcast, and then they do reissues. So I found out about them because they did this adorable reissue of 84 Charing Cross Road that I love very, very dearly. And then I found out they had a podcast, and then, the rest is history. So they've spoken about this book so many times, and I am a big fan. I've always, since I was a little girl, really been interested in ancient Rome, ancient Greece, and ancient Egypt. For some reason, I just am still to this day fascinated with those time frames. So this is actually not in ancient Rome. It's in ancient England during the times of the Romans, Celts, and Saxons. So it's when Rome was kind of before they were establishing Londinium, and when all of the battles were taking place. And it just dawned on me, I think that a lot of my love and fascination with these areas come from the Asterix and Obelix comics that I read as a little girl, because it was about a Gaulish village during the time of the Roman Empire, and there was always something happening in Egypt, something happening in Rome and London, and all of that. So, yeah. Anyway, side note. So I wanted to read this, and when I saw it on script, I thought, oh, well, I'm in the mood, so let's just jump on it. This is like an adventure classic. It's about a man who's going off into becoming a leader for a Roman legion. And his father was a very famous leader of a legion that was missing, the Ninth Legion. They went and kind of disappeared into the English fog is the story. And nobody really knows what's happened to them. And through he has some mishaps. Certain things don't work in his favor. And next thing you know, he has an opportunity, after being laid up for a while, to go and search for the missing eagle, which is part of what they carry into battle, which is the emblem of this specific squadron. And so it's an adventure story. It's meant to be a children's book, but it's a children's book in the way that maybe I would say Treasure Island is. It's adventure. It's not written and dumbed down for children. She just wrote very episodic, really plot driven, but there's a lot of interesting facts in there, and I just enjoyed it. I thought it was just a really good palate cleansing book for me to kind of move on to something else. So I was watching Nicole's video about her Invisible Cities project, specifically to Argentina, and what she'd been reading. And I'll put a link to her channel below. It's Nicole is Here to Learn. And she mentioned Cesar Aira, And I have read some Cesar Aira before, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, wait a minute, I have one of his novellas. So I ran and grabbed it last night. This is Dinner. This is translated by Katherine Silver. Now, ironically, this one it says Hail Cesar by Patti Smith, very tiny at the bottom, which I think is lovely because I am a huge Patti Smith fan. So I grabbed this last night and immediately jumped in. So Cesar Aira does this kind of absurdist fiction. You never really know where it's going to go. His mind is wide open. And he does this thing. only read one other book of his, but it had this twist where you think you're reading one thing and then he just completely tilts the axle and it becomes something completely different. The same was true here. So we open with a man in his 60s who's taking his mother to his friend's house for dinner. And his mother is a little dotty. She's getting at that age where she's super cranky. She's not really present for a lot of things that happen and only pays a certain amount of attention. So it's almost like that age where you regress into being a little bit like a child. His friend is also a little out there and tells stories and misses like spots in the story. So you're not really sure what's happening, but he's kind of amusing nonetheless. And the mother and the friend really bond over names. Like the mother seems to know everyone in town and every name, and she has this cataloged in her mind. And so whenever this man name drops anybody, she's immediately piqued. Her interest is piqued. And so our main character feels like, oh, this is good. She's enjoying herself. Well, after dinner, he takes them to kind of show off his huge home. And he has all of these toys, and he thinks that she would like these like kind of very intricate, bizarre little things that he's picked up in his travels. She's not interested. She's kind of cranky, wants to go. And so they end up leaving and walking home. They get home and she's complaining about how boring and tedious that dinner was and just kind of going off about how lame it all was, which surprises him because he thought she was enjoying herself. She goes to sleep and he sits down to watch television, which is something that he never did until he moved back in with his mother after bankruptcy. So you get the sense, right? It's like this, this lonely man in his older age with his mother, and it's very poignant, very soft, kind of genteel story. And now it comes to the twist. I'm not spoiling anything here because it's very early on. He starts to watch this cable show, this local cable show that's really like low budget. One of the things that they do is they have this camera crew that goes out on Saturday night downtown and just interviews people out on the street. And he's talking about like how low budget it is. How it seems like they never really know what they're doing. Everything is just kind of impromptu as they go. And he's so shocked because they jump on a moped and they've heard like there's some news breaking. So they end up going to a cemetery because apparently the dead are awakening. This quaint, sweet little book turns into a zombie story. And I think you may know me by now. I'm chicken. I don't like scary stories. So I'm almost reading it through my fingers. Not sure what I'm getting into. This turned out to be so enjoyable, so clever. I cackled. I mean, like it has a suspense and that nervousness of like unstoppable horror that's kind of seeping into this town. But it's also funny, and it's also absurd and ridiculous. But it's like a literary take on the zombie novel. This is super tiny. It's like 101 pages. This one is published by New Directions, and I enjoyed the hell out of this. It was such a shock and such a surprise. I'm glad I read it. It was a real enjoyable palate cleanser. Okay, so that's what I read. I feel like I had a fantastic collection of books there. What I'm currently reading, as per usual, making slow, steady progress on Marcel Proust in Search of Lost Time, Volume 2, In the Shadow of Young Girls in Flower. Then my good friend Leo and I are buddy reading The 11th Life, and this is by Nino Haratischvili. This is so lovely. We're really enjoying it. I have a check-in this weekend. It reads very, very quickly, but it's layered. There's fascinating characters, multi-generational family saga set in Georgia, and fantastic so far. Then we can't forget Anita Brookner. So we're continuing on with our Brookner reading project. So we are, I think this is maybe the 8th. This is Louis Percy. And here we're introduced to what may be the Brookner woman in a man. Very, very curious to see what she's doing here. A lot of her similar elements are present in there, which are a young person who's kind of been chained to the family, specifically close to the mother, not really sure how to start their life, academic, smart, but not very sociable or able to get out in the world and kind of stumbling a little bit and dealing with loneliness. So very curious to see what happens with that. And then I'm listening to an audiobook that came in from my library holds. This is Winter Counts, and it's an indigenous author, David Heska, Wanbli, Weiden. And this is a thriller. The main character is like this vigilante who lives on the reservation, and they're Lakota. And he's dealing with his nephew who got involved in something, and there's some deaths on the res from drugs. There's some suicides that seem suspicious, and he's kind of pulled in. And he's like the anti-hero because he kind of dispenses justice for hire when they can't get people can't get justice from the court system. So the things that I like so far, there's an interesting look at the Lakota reservation, and he is someone who is rejecting custom, or rejecting tradition, and so that is an interesting take. It feels so predictable though, and it's a little clunky. I'm enjoying some aspects, but the writing and the plot leave a little bit to be desired. I'll talk more about it next week. So that's what I'm currently reading. And then for next week, Invisible Cities Project moves to a new 3 set of countries because we're moving into February. So it's going to be Colombia, China, and Egypt. I'm looking forward to unveiling those books that I'll be reading. As well as Black History Month. So I have a ton of books that I have been meaning to read, including The Last Thing You Surrender, including so many books that I put in my stack for the book spin. So I'll put a link to that video so you can see that, because I plan on cycling through some of those, like Jesse's new novel, Brian Washington's Memorial. There's just a lot there that I haven't read that I need to read, and I'm dying to. So expect some of that, and that's it. A lot of things ahead. Look forward to a great reading weekend. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll end it here by saying we are still in a global pandemic. Please, if you go outside, maintain safe social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, and do not touch your face. That's it for me for now. I'll look forward to talking to you later. Bye.